call the meeting to order, and I'll just start with an announcement that tomorrow evening there's a public workshop that is being held. There are two sessions, one at 4:30 p.m. and one at 6:30 p.m. At 300 Baker Ave. That's a big corporate building at the Hangar Cafe. And the topic is about the future Aspet River pedestrian bridge that we hope to build. And so you can come and hear more about the plans for that and provide your input on the location and the design that would connect the Baker Ave Corporate Center with West Concord Village. So with that in mind, now we will move on to our public hearing. So I'd like to open our public hearing, our 7 o'clock item, which is the application of Fat Face Corporation by Mark Bobrowski Esquire for a special permit under sections 3.3 and 11.6 of the zoning bylaw to establish a new formula business for a clothing store. It's in Concord Center at 4 Walden Street, parcel 0832, and our newly minted bylaw, or revised bylaw.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Bobrowski, my office is in Damon Mill, and I'm pleased to be here tonight to hopefully fill the last space in the old toy store. This will be the Walden Street wing of the old toy store. If you're standing looking at the front door of the nut shop, it's the door to the left. And what we have is an application here from Fat Face, which is a UK lifestyle clothing brand. I'm told, having looked at their website and talked to people who wear their clothes, some in Concord already, that it's a cross between Eddie Bauer and Banana Republic, so it's that kind of casual but chic wear. The product is directed towards women, men, young adults, and infants and children. So they're covering all bases in their business plan. There are about 230 stores in the UK and Ireland, and the first stores have opened now in the US. Since 2016, there are about 19 Fat Face outlets in America. Most here concentrated in the Northeast. There's Burlington, Andover, a couple of other places locally. Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Portland, Maine also have stores. So the demographics seem to be like the store that they proposed to open here in Concord. With me is Greg Droz. He's going to walk you through the technical aspects of the store, the garbage, the removal, the floor space, the typical issues that we talk about here. Then I'll come back and make their case for a special permit.
Okay.
So the store is 1817 square feet. Fat Face, kind of keeping with the theme of what we've tried to achieve with renovating the ground floor here between Cafe Nero, the nut shop. Now hopefully Fat Face is kind of really honoring the structure of the building. So exposed brick, reclaimed hardwood floors, kind of fitting with that theme that we've had here on the ground floor and honoring the building. Trash is just left to deliveries from cardboard boxes and items that the clothes are delivered in. So what we'll do is up the trash collection. Right now it's 4 days a week in that alley. We'll up it to 5 days a week to make up the additional refuse that's generated by the store. Other than that, deliveries are just via UPS, FedEx, no large box trucks, nothing like that in terms of deliveries. Just clothing, seasonal items, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And they'll be storing excess items in the basement.
And do I see there are 2 to 3 people per shift, typically?
2 to 3 people per shift, and then they're tried hired mostly from within the community around Concord.
Okay. And is 1,800 square feet a typical size for one of these?
Yes.
And are they're typically a high street type of
They try and focus
locations?
on the village locations. So Mark mentioned Burlington. It's actually Burlington, Vermont.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Burlington, Vermont, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Portland, Maine. They're on the Cape. They opened in Chatham. They're in Newport. So they try and go for that villagey, local community feel.
Edgartown. I saw Edgartown in films too.
Yep.
Okay.
They're not going into malls. The one location they went to in Linfield is not doing well for them. So they're trying to stay away from those lifestyle centers and stick more with Main Street.
Okay. That's good. Yeah. I think I looked at the report. I wondered if other members of the board had questions. Because this isn't really a site plan review. With the criteria that we have are relatively straightforward in terms of the concentration of businesses, the type of business, the impact on other parts of the center. And then just the sheer number of formula businesses, which we're below the threshold that we set. Anything else?
I have no questions.
I have one question.
Sure.
It might be for Elizabeth, but the application referred to the approval of Nero with regard to parking. So I was just wondering if when Nero was approved, there was some assessment or assumptions done about how the rest of the space would be built out, and at that time whether there was some assessment done about the parking requirement.
So when, before Cafe Nero, the whole building was retail. It was all the toy store.
Okay.
And one small portion was McWalter Insurance. So that was considered business, which has the same parking requirement. So when Cafe Nero came through, they did the parking analysis based on the rest of the building still maintaining its previous retail use. And the relief from parking was for the increase for Cafe Nero.
Change their use. Okay.
So this section has always been retail and is considered legally non-conforming as it relates to parking. When Cafe Nero came through, that was part of the whole parking assessment.
Got it. Okay.
If this had changed to anything other than retail, then this would be a completely different application.
Okay. Thanks.
Our parking study had general office on the top floor and retail in the remaining spaces on the first floor.
Thanks.
Anything else?
So I can walk through the criteria that you've adopted for the special permit,
Sure.
if it's helpful. I had done so on page 2 of the memo that I gave you, which is dated May 22nd. And the general criteria for a special permit are impacts on economic and community needs. As we said, we're proud that this is going to fill the old toy store space after many years of being vacant, and that more or less speaks for itself. Traffic flow and safety concerns, including parking and loading. As Elizabeth just said, that assessment was done with Nero, and parking is determined adequate as a result of the Nero special site plan review decision. Adequacies of utilities and public services. There is a sewer connection permit already issued for this spot. We don't have 1,000 gallons a day of wastewater flow, so there's no appeal forthcoming to the Public Works Commission. Impacts on the natural environment. The only real impact we would have is stormwater management, and that's been addressed in the overall building design that Nero submitted earlier. Fiscal impacts. We will have 2 or 3 employees on a shift and potentially 6 to 10 in total across various shifts. When possible, FatFace will recruit from the local community. And then you have a number of additional criteria for formula businesses, and I'll just touch on those quickly. The business is designed and operated in a manner that preserves distinctive small town character. As we've stated in the promotional materials, and you can find these on the website, FatFace caters to family-oriented women and men who are attracted by an active, casual, outdoor lifestyle. That seems to fit Concord to a T, having lived here for 20 years. B, the formula business contributes to the diversity of uses to assure a balanced mix of businesses. There are apparel stores in Concord Center, including French lessons and a couple of other ones nearby. Mostly the apparel stores cater to women with the exception of Blue, which is a men's store. But this is across the board, as I said earlier, all demographics and types of folks are being addressed by their line of goods, from men, women, young adults, and children. And in particular, it's casual stuff as well, which is sometimes not the case in the other stores. Does not result in an over-concentration of formula businesses in the immediate vicinity. In the immediate vicinity, there is the nut store, which is not a formula business, French lessons, same, J.M. McLaughlin, Cafe Nero, and Patina Green. The McLaughlin store is apparel, and the Nero is a restaurant. Those are the formula businesses. I saw in the memo today that Rockland Trust is now the 11th formula business.
Rockland Trust, yeah.
Where are they coming? Or are they here
They're
already?
here, they're next to, in the livery,
Oh,
in
okay.
Tuttle's livery.
I missed them.
Yeah.
I thought for a minute it might be in the old Bank North, but I drove by it and saw the lease sign still up there.
That's still up.
Yeah, that's a rough building to lease. So we're not concentrating as we see it. And then lastly, it's compatible with existing architecture and the unique aesthetic appearance of the district. We won a community preservation award for the restoration of the building when Nero was permitted, and it's the same building.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. If there aren't any other comments from the board, I think I'll just open it up to the public to see if there are any comments from the audience on this application. Well, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion.
Just get to it. I'll make a motion that we recommend, no, that we approve, we get.
Yes, we're it.
That we,
We're it.
that we approve the application for special permit pursuant to section 3.3 and 11.6 for a retail formula business in the Concord Center Business District by the applicant Fat Face Corporation.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those, any discussion?
Nope.
Okay. All those in favor? No opposed, so your special permit is granted.
Thank you.
And I think then I can close the public hearing, and then we can continue with the other items on our agenda. However, I wanted to ask, I mean, since we have Mr. Bobrowski here, I wanted to just take advantage of his expertise for just a second. I mean,
It's your meeting.
yeah.
Greg's time.
I mean, because, you know,
Before making me, I'm good.
we only recently, of course, extended the formula business bylaw that was passed back when you were on the board to Concord Center. And then in preparing the new parts of the bylaw, I read with great interest your article that you wrote back in, I think, 2012 on formula business bylaws and the dormant commerce clause.
Right.
And subsequent to that, of course, there's been one land court decision, you know, which we also studied pretty carefully and felt that we were kind of, that first of all, that particular ZBA and planning board, they had completely gone amok, run amok. But that nonetheless, of course, it raised concerns in the town about the validity of our bylaw. And so I was just curious if you had any just informal commentary that you'd like to make at this point. I mean, clearly this application it was very uncontroversial, as if we are now in fact at the limit of 12 that we had proposed, you know, the next one could be a lot more exciting.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just curious if you had any views
My takeaway
to
from
share.
reading all the cases and preparing the article was that the Isla Mirada, you know, bad example was driven by its focus on fast food.
Yeah.
Because when you get into formula business and it's fast food restaurants,
What's the
I think
alternative?
I had a list in there of the top 10.
Yeah.
I mean, Subway has 20,000 outlets.
Yeah.
The next one down, I think, was McDonald's at 12, all the way down to, you know, Taco Bell at 6,000. So it's all about interstate business at that point.
Yeah.
You might as well just say, in banning fast food restaurants, that we're banning interstate businesses that
Yeah.
serve food. And so I think that's where they ran afoul and had the damage award. I think if there's places in town where people can do business and it's not regulated with a formula limitation, have you done it at the depot, or is it
No.
just the two?
No.
So that's an example. So there's opportunity for people there who have formula businesses still to locate.
Yeah.
And I think that takes some of the pressure off.
Okay.
But my takeaway from it was if you're going to get in trouble, it's going to be in regulating fast food.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think it's okay.
We have a fast food bylaw on the books, so, but that's different.
I think it's okay to regulate it as fast food.
Yes.
Formula fast food is another thing.
That's right.
That's where it crosses the line
Yeah.
into that interstate protected.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for that.
My pleasure.
Was there anything contemplated for a formula business that's not currently a formula business that grows into a formula business?
Yes, and so they're grandfathered in effect.
Okay.
that they do add to the number.
Yeah.
But that number can go above the limit in effect. So, yeah. So feel free to start another great business.
No, Graham's Nuts is doing fantastic.
We just met at Nero. So Greg's put a
Okay.
couple over here to remind you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay. So, I think we will continue with our housing initiatives discussion. And we continue to have a lot to talk about.
We always have a lot to talk about. So, in front of you, Matt had pulled together for the two-family topic, what is in front of you, and again, apologize. At the end, when there's updates, I'll give you an update on everything that's happening, going on. But what I did is took the accessory dwelling discussion from last time, and all the questions and decisions that the board had made, tried to put that back into the memo as kind of like the starting point to make sure everybody was kind of on the same page. I don't expect you to read through it tonight and say yes or no, but so for the next meeting, quickly want to make sure that I did get everything right. Also, what I found, and I'm not sure if I had previously sent it to the board or not, was a handout that Acton puts together for their accessory dwelling bylaw, and kind of has a couple of other things to think about. So for the next meeting, I will start actually drafting, pulling together the draft bylaw. And then I think it's kind of good to have this document where these questions got answered and have the reasons why.
Oh, yeah.
As that becomes, I'm looking at it more as the information side of the bylaw, where you're starting to have this discussion. People can go and look at the draft bylaw, but see how you got there. So we're beginning to educate people long before the board ever has before, and I'm hoping that helps smooth things and really helps to refine bylaw amendments before we're going to say in the next couple of months instead of in November before the warrant closes.
Yes.
So that's what my strategy that I'm thinking might help to, for the education piece of it, as well as just making sure as we move forward, everybody's kind of on the same page.
Yeah. So I had a couple of comments on your descriptions or your summary of our conversation. So the first one, I thought we said that detached accessory dwellings would be allowed by right if they're within the setbacks required for the primary structure, right? So it doesn't say that here.
If they meet all the dimensional setback requirements, you're saying it's
For
not
the
specifically called out?
Well, if they meet it for the ones required for the primary structure, because in an outbuilding can be 5 feet from the,
Right.
and we
We're
said
trying to
that
avoid that.
would require a special permit to do
Right.
that. So I would just make that clearer.
Yep. So it would be meet all of the dimensional setback requirements of the principal dwelling.
Yes, there you go.
Yep.
And then I thought too, the max gross floor area, I think that the range was actually 720 feet to 1,000, though I tried to round it up to 750, but I think I should be honest here and say that 720 was actually proposed. And that the secondary and subordinate, I thought that the existing bylaw provided that 1/3 to 2/3 ratio, and I think we should just note that, we were planning to keep that, right, as kind of how it's subordinate, is that it's first of all, it's got this limit, hard limit, but then it also has a proportional limit.
Well, and the Acton bylaw does that. It says it limits
Oh, they say
by square foot,
50%.
right.
See,
I
with
mean, we-
50%, that's a duplex to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But
if you impose an actual square footage, then the no more than 1/3 of the gross floor area of the single family dwelling isn't needed.
Well,
do
if it's a
whichever is
small existing dwelling, the accessory unit could be bigger than the principal unit. I mean, I
Well,
guess
but
then it
has to
becomes
be-
the
it has
principal
to be-
unit.
It has to be a minimum of 350 square feet.
Yeah, but I mean, let's say you've got and there are
I
not
can-
very
I can-
many.
So,
You've got a 1,200 square foot ranch, and now okay, even so, yeah, there's not very many smaller than that. Okay, yeah, okay,
I think that section you'll see will be replaced
okay,
by the side, because you have a minimum already of 350.
yeah, okay.
So now it would be, for the board to figure out, all right, what's gonna be the max?
Okay,
And then, the max, does that include basements, garage, if they do another garage?
oh yeah.
So those are some additional things to consider.
Yep.
Consider.
What do people think about, Acton said accessory apartment may not have more than 2 bedrooms. What do you think about the calling out of that limitation?
I like that. Personally, I don't think that a 3-bedroom accessory dwelling sounds like an accessory dwelling.
Right, that's kind of what I was thinking. I mean, I don't.
Did you see the thing, at the very end of this, since we're talking about accessory dwellings, that I found Shrewsbury, now they define an in-law apartment literally as an in-law apartment, that literally they have to be
Oh, wow.
related by blood or marriage to the principal resident, okay?
I'm not sure you can do that.
I assume that, yeah, but skip that part. The other part I thought was kind of interesting, that not to be occupied by more than 3 persons, and I thought that's also reasonable.
Well, let's think about kind of
Potentially.
what we're trying to,
Well, what if it's
do or.
a husband and wife and twins?
Right,
Ah,
so
see,
like,
yeah, I know, it's tricky.
you
Well,
think
and
that
if
it's
husband
limited
and
by the
wife and a
square
child, they have a
footage.
child, they have to move out.
Right,
Right, so,
that
I
to
mean,
me might be too limiting.
I think the number of people in the house kind of gets self-regulated with
Square footage.
space
Yeah.
and conflict.
Okay, okay.
I have to ask some ground setting questions because I missed the second part of the meeting. We're considering accessory dwelling units separate from 2 families, right? That's
Yes.
focused on 2 different purposes. So the accessory dwelling unit, we're thinking is primarily in the form of the traditional in-law apartment
Correct.
or converted barn kind of, right? I mean, it's
Roughly,
typically
yes.
smaller.
Yeah, they could have, right.
And this series of questions on accessory, they're asking questions about this hypothetical bylaw that hasn't been drafted, or
Exactly.
modifications to the bylaw that haven't been drafted yet. And
Creates a
and
space
answering
in
the
which a
question.
bylaw could be drafted, yeah.
Right, that's all. I just needed to get caught up.
So I no more than 2 rooms, I think.
That's a good
helps-
thing.
Bedrooms?
No bedrooms.
I think that helps too, just in terms of the potential objections that we're gonna hear.
Well, okay, so now just me being devil's advocate and knowing what the Board of Health goes through when you look at this, it's like, okay, so bedrooms is distinct. So they actually count rooms. And, so somebody could say, okay, well, here's my accessory dwelling unit, here's my bedroom, here's my study and my artist space.
Right.
And so what the Board of Health, and specifically under Title V, counts number of rooms. So
Oh, okay.
a 4, typically, I'll have to ask, but whether it's, 5 rooms is considered a 2-bedroom house. So they actually have
I think they look at
defined.
both,
So they have
Yeah.
it defined.
yeah.
So I can ask for her input on,
Huh.
How to define that, so it,
Yeah, because if these are on septic, of course, is gonna be material to the,
so I'll ask her, how many rooms is a
Consider-
house for, 2 bedrooms? I think it's, I wanna say it's 4.
I think the bedrooms are quite distinct from the rooms, because I know from
Well,
my
they count-
renovation that
They count up all the rooms.
As
I
well
know
as the bedrooms, though.
A 10-room house is a 5-bedroom septic system.
They have two different ways to
Yeah.
calculate
So
the number.
I'll ask Susan on that one.
So, man, is the idea that we're considering with the accessory dwelling units and expanding or modifying it, that would be essentially an easier thing to reach than a two-family?
Well, the situation is a little bit different. So with accessory dwellings, they're rented, not sold necessarily. They also would be throughout the town. You know, and they'd have this limited size. So the two families are going to be, you know, they're potentially duplexes. They're limited by, you know, lot size, FAR, and other dimensional requirements, but not limited otherwise. And they could be, both units could be condoized and sold potentially.
Is the level of review lower with the accessory unit because this, what you could build is less?
Well, they're both potentially going to be by right, but again, one in a smaller area of the town, you know. So there's certainly, you could think of them as overlapping, but different.
I mean, I think that, well, I was thinking there would be a different standard of review for an accessory unit versus a two-family, but if it's by area, I mean, I would kind of bolt down in terms of dimensions and things like that, what you can do by right, or even just.
Well, that's what
That's
we're
what
doing.
we're trying to do, and then they could
But,
apply.
I mean, I would be pretty narrow in doing it. I don't think this solves our larger, you know, housing cost equation. This helps people, you know, move into their carriage house and rent their house out. But it's pretty narrow.
Every little bit helps.
It helps, but I would think in terms of dimensional, like talking about number of bedrooms, total max dimension, that would be pretty bolted down and would fit that traditional 1,000-foot.
And that's what we're hoping here with this.
Are you not seeing that in your
Yeah,
skim
because
of
the
this?
max square,
Because I think we've tried to do that.
yeah, the gross floor area, 750 to 1,000 square feet
And
is a max.
I mean, because this isn't the actual bylaw.
you mean when we do
There's ranges and opinions sort of expressed in here, and that's what I'm catching
Yeah.
up on.
I think that's still being nailed down. And just so you know, that 750, 720 came from our estimate about what you could put above a regular garage, I think.
And that would be by right, and you could by special permit go over it.
So this is kind of just the groundwork that I'll use to draft a bylaw, and you know, there'll be, here's a little, is it 750 or is it
Right, what's the
1,000? I mean,
maximum?
I think the expectation is that ultimately the board will settle on one number to as you said, narrow that, narrow that, the criterias.
Yeah, and on the number of bedroom things, I mean, we've seen that where somebody's comes with a suspicious,
Yeah.
you know, third,
PRDs,
fourth floor that has 2 bathrooms and 2 offices. I guess I would say, I mean, if you just focus it on square footage, you're not going to be, if it's, for example, 750 square feet, you're not putting 3 bedrooms in.
Right, you mostly need that. But I hadn't thought about basements or whether they're gonna put in another garage.
So those are other things to.
Yeah.
Gross floor area.
Add to the
Which
list.
does basement count, or does some people don't count that? Gross
We
floor
changed
area.
it a few years
Well,
ago.
gross floor area includes, includes.
Anything finished?
Well, anything that has a
Access.
ceiling
Depending on
height
the
of
ceiling
6'8".
height.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
So we would.
yeah, so it includes, any space where the ceiling height, it does not include space where the ceiling height is less than 6'8". So it does include basements, it includes attics,
That's gross
Right.
floor area.
so.
Okay.
So it would be gross floor area that you'd be looking at. And that would also include, garages, and if they wanted to do a detached garage, it's okay, well, it's not technically part of the accessory dwelling, but then it would get wrapped into the floor area ratio requirement.
Right.
So there's a couple of checks and balances. here.
There are. I think what's nice is we have a fair number of them already sort of waiting.
But
to
what's nice
contain
is that
this.
you're 3 months ahead
Yeah.
Well,
than
the other
where you've
thing,
ever started on bylaw amendments.
you're gonna ask for an analysis to find the current number of detached accessory structures, because I think that's
Yes.
something people are gonna ask about. So having an idea about that, potential volume.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there would be a concern about these accessory dwellings being used as like Airbnb kind of use, or
We have separate bylaws to regulate that.
so how does this prevent somebody from?
So this itself does not prevent that, but that anybody who wants to have rent out their thing for short-term rentals would need to have a special permit to do that.
Okay.
So I don't know if we still do it, but we used to regularly scan Airbnb and make sure that those listings reflected those that had special permits. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Good question.
Are we ready to tackle two-family initial discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I did was I went through that big old document that talked about multifamily zoning in Massachusetts and just picked out examples that I found that related specifically to two families. And wow, I found a lot of rough going for two families. You'd think that they were the scourge of the universe or something. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that these examples from other towns are something we should emulate. However, I do think that they give us the kind of playing field on which we need to legislate. And so I thought that it was very helpful to see what they said. So, and the questions are similar, but a little different from the ones that we had for accessory dwellings. So, I don't know if I guess I'll just start driving through questions 1 through whatever.
Can I ask you first?
Yeah.
What did you survey when you were looking at other bylaws? Like which towns? Were you looking at like?
Well, so this was a
Specific.
document that had a compendium of bylaw language that referred to multifamily dwelling units for all towns in Massachusetts, which there aren't all that many towns that allow it. I mean,
Okay,
believe it or
well,
not, like you won't find a listing for Weston. It just didn't have any, you know.
Stunned.
So, yeah, and it's a little bit dated. It's 15 years old, I think 2004. But the rate at which these bylaws change is pretty glacial, even though glaciers themselves are moving a little faster these days. But
What I can also do is there's a mass planners listserv.
yeah,
And put a question out there if there are any communities that have adopted two-family zoning in the past.
well, and in fact, it is like a new wave that's coming now. I don't know if you've seen some of the reports, but there definitely is movement afoot to try to enable this.
Well, bring it back.
Yeah, re-enable it. And so it would be nice to see what other towns are thinking.
So past 4 years, is that?
Gosh, I think the past year, there's going to be more activity than there will in the,
No, if
If I remember
we
the
put out the
question.
question on the listserv.
Yeah.
Any community that has adopted two-family
Yeah.
zoning in the past 4 years?
right. But didn't you send out that report that was the sort of overall state of the state for housing?
Well, that's housing
Choice.
reform.
Right, but I think that part of what she wrote up was, just a summary of what multifamily housing.
Chris Kletchman's
Yeah.
presentation?
Right.
Yeah, I can go back and look at it. And
Yeah, and I went through that presentation and basically it concluded that, very little has been done. Very little multifamily dwelling housing has been produced in the last decade in Massachusetts. And while there's now a movement to try to enable more of it, there hasn't been anything up until now, much notable. And that was a survey done this past year, so it's pretty current. So let's talk about it. So for
Well,
two
On
families.
that note, I would say that maybe that lack of development of two-family house has to do with some of these restrictions you've identified, even in the town
Absolutely.
where it's allowed. And so we might not want to, and we're looking at these as examples, we might be looking at them as examples that don't necessarily work.
Negative examples of what we should do. Exactly. Well, in fact, that was the lament that Chris's presentation had, which was these towns have made this so hard. Why would anybody build one of these things, even if it theoretically could be done?
But also economically, did we get like from developers' perspective, does it make sense?
We haven't yet done that, but I think that what we need to first do is to come up with a proposal that they can look at and go, yeah, I could go for that, that
That's
kind of
where
thing.
I think having like the
Listen,
key questions, have the questions out there and how the board develop an answer, have that go along with an actual draft bylaw,
Yeah.
will help really formulate the discussion with stakeholders and targeted groups such as local builders.
Yeah, but I mean, at the chair's breakfast last week, I brought this up, and one of the people that was there, it turns out was a retired builder. He came up, handed me his card after the meeting, was very enthusiastic, so that was a positive sign, I thought. Okay, so I think the first thing is, are we going to have a by right option, or is this by special permit? Any discussion?
I mean, if we're trying to make it easier, it seems like we should have something by right within certain criteria.
Yeah, so conforming lots, should we make it similar to like our discussion last week on accessory dwelling units said by right on conforming lots and potentially by right on non-conforming lots, as long as you're not going over the 50% addition. That's a little harder with the two-family.
7.15.
Yeah,
Right.
Well,
so would we have a
I'm
similar
sort of
kind of thing?
inclined to the approach being, I mean, I look at these restrictions and things like all these various requirements, you can have a two-family if your lot is twice the size of a single-family lot.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the approach I would prefer to see, because we know there are two families in this town today that work great, and it's because they're horribly non-conforming, right? I'd like to see an approach where we allow more of those things, which I think with 80 years hindsight, we realize are a very successful model.
Yeah,
But that, meaning less restrictions that say you've got to have, like a greater setback or a larger lot, but not as a completely unshackled experiment. I think so. So having maybe the first 5 years of this, it's a special permit requirement with more discretion on the part of the town staff and the planning board to review these proposals with fewer restrictions on what can be built.
but don't you think that a special permit in itself, that process is a deterrent to someone even proposing
Well,
to
that
do this?
would be my question: is how much do you think? I mean, is it possible to sort of give us, just for the sake of this discussion, an idea of how much you think a special permit acts as a speed bump to somebody as opposed to? just
It's a
being-
speed bump.
I think it is.
It depends on whether it's a well thought out project,
Mhm.
whether somebody really is interested in doing a two-family that fits into the neighborhood, or whether they're just in it to push the maximum build out of a
Yeah.
lot. So if it is
And I guess it
let's
goes to.
say, Commonwealth Ave, those two families. If there was a vacant lot and somebody came in and said, I want to propose exactly what's built across the street and it requires a special permit, it would take them, because of the legal notice requirement and the appeals period, it'd be $200 for the application, some money for their abutters list, $100 and something for the legal notice, and it would take them about 3.5 months.
Okay,
So to me, that's, I don't find that an onerous process.
Right.
It becomes onerous when somebody wants to push the edge of the
right,
envelope.
but we're not talking PRD with a traffic study and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
No.
it'll depend on what our special permit criteria are, is how expensive it is to show you've met the criteria, but, I mean, I just kind of feel like I'd like to put sort of fewer restrictions on it. That, I mean, you put the restrictions in place to make sure you don't get any doozies by right? But if we put fewer restrictions on it, but review it by special permit, there may be a slower rollout, but there may be.
Well, how about
Less
special
doozies.
permit just for the conversion of a single family to a two family?
Oh, you mean within the existing structure?
Well, I mean, you might be doing an addition, but you're converting a existing single family to a two family. That you could build a new two family by right on a conforming lot. You had it. I mean, not that there are that many empty conforming lots
Right.
sitting around waiting for. I mean, or you could replace a tear down with a two family by right.
And-
Again, one of the checks and balances we have here is that we have all these dimensional requirements, and my proposal is that we have the same dimensional requirements for two families as for single family homes. All the
and-
same
and
setbacks, all the same heights,
I mean,
everything.
that I would be in support of, right? And what you don't want to get is somebody to, build a big, huge thing that everybody gets angry about, two
Yeah.
families. By right.
Yeah,
The other thing is, we're talking about in a certain.
just
you know,
in residence C, just within
right.
a half mile
we
of town,
we
so
have
that's
a
another
limited
check
place
on
of
it.
where they're gonna build,
Yeah,
limited size of those lots. I feel like the reason that we're trying to do this is to encourage more and smaller and varied housing. And so if we don't make it easy, then I don't think we're encouraging it. Or easy, I mean, you're talking about easier, and I think we're talking about actually almost incentivizing.
well, and in fact, I worry, my biggest worry is no one will build any of these.
Well, your biggest worry is having to have the discussion with the Public Works Commission. Because nobody will be able to build these if they have to do an on-site septic system.
Mm-hmm.
In residency. So tell me why that might be the case.
Currently, the Public Works Commission, under the wastewater planning study, you can have one service connection. So you would not be able to have two separate service connections for
So,
the two.
What's the Public Works Commission doing to implement the long-range plan, I wonder? Right?
Well, so that's why we're gonna,
Well,
We gotta get them on board, or else this whole thing
Well,
is
you have to
moot,
have the,
right?
to have the conversation, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so, what is the current, capacity at the wastewater treatment plant since that study was done many years ago? So, yeah, you might not, so we may be able to have a two-family, you might still have to only have, one connection.
right.
So you would have to then, have,
Can you
Each
have two
unit go to-
meters with one, or is
No,
each
you-
meter a connection? Anyway, we don't have to get into that right now, but
Yeah,
so
no.
yes, you could still have two family, but you'd need to split the,
it would have to come to,
Yeah,
one handhold on the property and then one connection,
you can do that with a condo plan.
Yeah.
okay. So, it's we definitely need to have that conversation, but it's not necessarily a showstopper.
No,
But it's a big deal
it,
to
it
think
is,
about now.
well, you have to have the conversation because if it is a showstopper if there isn't a way to accommodate a two-family on town sewer.
Mhm.
Cause you wouldn't be able to do it in any other way.
Okay, so, I mean, Burton then is kind of saying perhaps he wouldn't necessarily support having two families by right on conforming lots.
Well, but I'm saying that for probably a reason that's counterintuitive. Wanting to encourage people to be able to build these things that fit into the character of the neighborhood, right? And not to put an additional hurdle, but to remove the restrictions on the ability to build a house that looks like those historic two families. Now, if you're saying, well, the way we're going to do that is we're going to it's going to have the same dimensional requirements as a single family, and we think those dimensional requirements are what are resulting in houses that size rather than, I mean, if
In Residence C,
let's
not
say-
elsewhere,
let's
by
say
the
in-
way.
I mean, so what do you think the maximum house is that you could be building in Residence C with those dimensional requirements? Because if you could build a 10,000 square foot house, but people don't build that because,
No, but in Residence C, again, nominally, you've got a 1/4 acre lot. Now, there are certain exceptions to that, but most of them are 1/4 acre lot. And then that implies a 3,600 square foot house.
okay,
Our structures,
Yeah.
you know, so,
Excluding basements, open,
and
Screen porches.
small buildings.
but that's pretty much in
That's the
line with
floor
what I
area
think of as
That's
historical
what
two
most
family.
people would,
Two
yeah.
family would normally be like a 2,000 square foot apartment and a 1,400 square foot apartment kind of thing, a lot of times.
If they're one over the other, you think, yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be the idea is, you know, hopefully our dimensional regulations that are already on the books, as long as we're just talking Residence C, like the floor area ratio is no help in B and A, you know.
Right.
But in Residence C, it actually, I think, would help keep things in line.
well, but there are anomalies in.
There are some outlier lots. You can have a
Well,
three-quarter.
Not outliers, how about right next to, the Colonnade building?
Which one is that?
Where's that?
So that's right where the Concord Center Business District ends on Main Street.
Oh, yeah, there's
The
that
next
beautiful
step.
big
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
That's Residence C.
Yeah,
That's a
but that
big lot.
it was also a very big house.
Yeah.
If that was a two-family, you wouldn't know any different.
Where they just took the wisteria off the,
No, this is right next to the Concord Business District.
Yeah,
Where the
gorgeous
drive into
Victorian house back there, huge thing,
the something.
a huge
In the
lot.
corner?
It's
Right
like
by the
a,
library,
yeah.
kind of
it's right
on Main
there.
Street before you start going around to the library. I think.
Anyway,
Anyways.
there are 3/4 acre lots in Residence C where one theoretically could build a 10,000 square foot two-family, but they could also build a 10,000 square foot single-family house.
so that raises, but that does raise the question, so we say the dimensional requirements here, but could we put on an additional, you know, safety valve dimensional requirement for two families? Because with the focus being that we're not trying to encourage people to cram in more 5,000
two big
square foot,
houses,
$2 million houses. We're trying to encourage people to be, for the market, to make sense in the marketplace to build houses that are 2,000 feet or less by making them multifamily.
I remember, now this is an interesting question. When we were doing floor area ratio, I thought we could not have a firm upper limit. We couldn't say
Of
you
square
can't
footage?
be, yeah, you can't limit the size of a dwelling. You can't say it's 5,000 square foot max.
But we're gonna do that with
You can't-
accessory.
You can't regulate the interior space of a single family dwelling. You can't tell somebody that you can only have a kitchen, a living room, and, you know, a bedroom. You
But,
you
I mean,
can't tell
except,
them how the interior space of the dwelling is configured.
no, but with floor area ratio, the reason it's a ratio and not a just absolute size limit is there's a legal basis that prevents you from doing so. Otherwise, I think it would be a lot simpler to just go, you know,
Well, if it's-
4,000 square feet, that's it,
but if it's a
Residence C.
special- If it is a special permit, you can put,
Well, you can say, for example, like Lincoln does, you could have any building, you know, any residence with over 3,500 square feet has a design review, you know, or other special permit criteria. But, and so you could do that to this two-family type of thing, and that would make it a special permit above that, you know, square
special permit
footage.
above 3,500 square feet. I mean, I'm just throwing a number.
Yeah, I would think anything that would be above again, probably, it would need to be a little more than 3,500 because, you know,
For both
again,
of
on a
them
standard 1/4 acre lot, 3,600 would be allowed under our bylaws right now. So,
For a single family.
for a
dwelling.
single family, but I mean, also,
But
I
you
would
don't-
assume
you don't wanna-
two family.
you don't want a two-family to be out of character with,
No, but as long as it's within those same parameters as the single family.
right, so on a 10,000 square foot lot, that would be 3,600
Yeah.
square feet.
Right.
You could have a single family dwelling of 3,600 or a two-family of 3,600.
That's it, and that's a hard limit. I mean, well, you can go get a special permit, but the
Or go get a
criteria are
special.
very tough to go above that limit. So
For a single family.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think only a few have been granted, and only for a few hundred square feet at a time. So,
Did you have your question answered?
So going back around on number one,
yes,
so are two families allowed by right on conforming lots? You know, I definitely see, you know, Burton's comment about, and this has been a common practice of, you know, of many zoning bylaws. You start with, there have been many things where you started off, it was a special permit requirement, and then after a couple of years, you know, it got moved to by right. And that's a cautious approach
yeah,
for something that,
that's new.
is,
Well,
Well, so I've come around that bend, and I could see it being by right. I guess it would play out. There's a couple issues that I would want to see if we can address that would be different from single family. My big concerns being the character of the building and the proliferation of parking. The Somerville front yard of asphalt. But if we're talking about something where the dimensional requirements are going to make it look and feel like a single family house, it's already allowed in that, then I'd say by right would probably be workable.
and I think that's where you do that two-pronged approach. I mean, a two-family by right, that's, you know, 3,600 square feet or less, and a special permit if you wanna go over that. Cause then you get into the 6 criteria for a special permit, one being impacts on neighborhood character.
mm-hmm.
But that still wouldn't resolve the setback issue. You would still be required to meet the
Absolutely.
dimensional setback.
Those are all
Because that's just.
still there.
That's just a variance. I mean, and that won't get granted.
Yeah.
Just a thought, if we want to encourage this, why wouldn't we want to release the dimensional requirements, ease a little bit for two family, for two reasons. One, I mean, even if we say if it's a two family, we increase it by 20% square footage, then for the FAR, it's not going to make that much of an impact for the character. 20, I don't know, I'm just making a number. But also part of the problem with two family, I think the perception why people don't like it, usually they're built like just split in half. They built, that's an easy way of building it. They just mirror the, and it has a negative connotation. So maybe this will allow, I don't know, making it larger. The second reason is not that I haven't formulated it well in my mind, but the first reason, I think, to encourage developers to build it, they would need, I think, more square footage to, otherwise it's not going to be economical.
As you keep talking, kind of starts going back around the circle again, and that's where your example is imperfect. In Air, they've built a couple of two families. I don't know, it could have been a comprehensive permit, but it literally is, one, what is it? It's a garrison, right? Where it's just, and they're stuck together, and it's.
And that's
and
not going to help with
here's
the character of the place.
Here's the driveway on this
basically.
side, and here's the driveway on that side, and so I think they're going back through and thinking about, all right, this is a change, and I think there is a lot of fear, and that having it be, there's nothing wrong with having it start to be, we're gonna try this out as a special permit, so that there's notification of abutters, there's actual review of the architecture, because it's by right, you know.
Yeah.
Throw neighborhood compatibility and architecture out the window, cause,
They can do anything they want.
you know, nobody upstairs, you know, and I don't think we'd ever wanna, require, you know, staff to start,
Right.
you know, dedicating aesthetics and neighborhood character, but,
Yeah, I think that having the safety valve of above a certain size being triggering the special permit is a potential good thing to prevent neighborhood concerns. Alan, I also wondered when we started this process whether we would end up where you were suggesting, which is that, and in fact, it was funny when I looked at when I reviewed the other bylaws, I expected to see something like you said, that a two-family would have like, you know, a little bit more latitude with setbacks and, you know, well, not many towns have FAR, but if they did, a little bit more FAR. Instead, I found the opposite, right? They had to have a bigger lot. They couldn't have, the dimensional requirements were more strict. But I think that's because we weren't really looking so much at urban examples. They're more towns, you know, that they're suburban or rural. But I also have come around to feel like we're in a balancing act, right? On the one hand, we're trying to motivate developers. On the other hand, we're trying to ensure that we don't have a backlash, right? And so we need to kind of be careful here. And that's why I say, oh, don't mess with dimensional requirements if we can at first. And then, you know, maybe over time we do decide to incent it more. We see that, oh, they aren't getting built, or, you know, that kind of thing.
I think you would also have, some confusion and backlash is a good word, if somebody says, well, I have to meet this requirements for my single family dwelling, but you're saying that the requirements are relaxed if I intensify the use on my property. So I think there could be some backlash with that
From, neighbors or from
from
exactly.
the community in general.
Other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, there's, trying to understand how that would impact ultimately the amount of impervious surface being constructed in the town, and but also I just wish that I understood the economics better. Like we have somebody in our neighborhood who bought a 2-family and converted it to a single family.
Exactly.
And there was a 2-family on the market that I was watching in West Concord that just sat there. It was like perfectly lovely 2-family, and just seems like I'm just curious if this is like the most bang for your buck in terms of increasing the diversity of housing. But I think you're going like you have a multi-pronged approach. But.
Exactly. We don't know which one's going to stick.
Well, I think for many of the 2 families that are in town were developed, you know, so long ago that between typically 2 families used to be handled the way we're now talking about accessory dwelling units. So you bought a 2-family, so somebody in your family, your mother, would be in the other dwelling, and then, you know, they moved out, you know, you would rent it and that would be your income. That's what a 2-family was originally started, you know, out in this area. I'm not saying in the, you know, in the city, but what happened is, you know, that ability to do a 2-family went away, and since then, I'd be surprised if there were, you know, 100 2-families in town. I'd be surprised if 10 are remaining that haven't been condoed.
And so there's 2 in my neighborhood.
Yeah. So when you buy, you know, here's a 2-family. It's like, you know, are you buying just one unit in a 2-family, and then you have no control over who's next to you, and they're really close. So.
Oh, you're right, it's not 2-family. So they own the whole thing, and they can rent out. It must be an accessory on the first floor. That's what it is, yeah. It's not 2-family.
So a 2-family, you know, how the board's been talking about it is somebody can buy a 2-family as an investment and rent out both of them. And in an accessory dwelling, the property owner actually has to live in one. you can't condoize it and sell off the
Right.
accessory dwelling, so.
Right,
It'd
so
be nice
the-
to have like an example of figuring out how much a developer could make out of like building one single family that's
Well-
like 8,000 square feet versus two. Just to figure out if anyone would, the economics would actually work.
yeah,
for anyone.
an 8,000 square foot single family in residence C hopefully is not going to be
I
happening.
don't know.
Right, because we're, the two-family, we
Um,
are restricting to just a certain area of town right now, is what was being proposed.
But I mean, do you know what I mean? It'd be good to work through the economics of it to figure out
Mm-hmm.
like what if I don't know if developers make a standard like per square foot.
Well, yeah,
or-
well, and this is part of our outreach, and we're just starting the discussion to kind of know, well, what is the thing we're going to put in front of them and say, would you build one of these? So,
Got it.
you know, again,
But my concern is I don't wanna be beholden to what developers would do, you know, because, I think that's what we're seeing right now, and now we're seeing all these giant homes, because they can do that, and I mean, like, you can't even buy a house anymore, the developers buy it, and they just,
but the thing, we are beholden to the extent that they're the ones that are going to either build one of these or they're going to build one of those, you know?
right, but that's what, to the incentive part, if there was an incentive to build, you know, what we're trying to do, which is encourage, you know,
Yeah.
more density in the walkable town centers, then,
we
and
may-
they could still do it. I mean, and they're always going to make a profit. There's high demand,
Right.
and you know that this is not going to. I don't think this is going to make anything, you know, less demand.
And we may end up needing a density bonus to make that economically feasible. I don't know.
So why don't we make the accessory unit, accessory dwelling more relaxed, so that we don't need to deal with the two-family? Is that?
So,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
so
what-
that's another, that's, I
Yeah.
mean,
So
that's a, you know, definitely another option,
discussion.
and,
yeah, which is
and again, it could be starting with, you know, one thing, and,
Well, that's the
Yeah,
other
parks
possibility here is that, yeah, we start with accessory dwellings, we go to
then
two
you can
families
figure out-
eventually. The thing is, I wanted to put a menu of options on the table. And so that we could at least explore all of them and just see, because I have a feeling it's gonna take more than one thing to actually do this. So like, again, one restriction with the accessory dwelling, the owner has to live in it, you can't condoize it. So that's gonna limit
but why don't
the
we?
value to
I guess
some.
why don't we really ease those restrictions on the accessory dwelling?
Well, in
Maybe you
effect, that
then it
creates the
becomes-
two-family.
Because
I mean,
yes,
but
exactly,
the accessory dwelling is all throughout town.
So-
That's the other thing.
Yeah, so basically it comes back to historically what you're saying, two families were
well,
dealt
so.
as a,
But they were all in the town centers. And the thing is that
so this will
this,
affect the whole,
if you could think about maybe doing the two-family as an experiment on relaxing the accessory dwelling, but just in one area of town and with these specific parameters, that's sort of one other way to think of it.
Right, I see.
But you know, all of this discussion is starting because of, you know, the Envision Concord plan.
Yeah,
And if you go back to, you know, all of the input and, you know, discussions in that plan, most of the things that the committee heard, you know, dealt with more of the accessory dwelling unit side of things.
yeah, age in place, for example.
And not necessarily, you know, actual two-family.
Right.
So, you know, while they kind of both have, I think there is more of a town-wide need for the accessory dwelling unit side of things to, you know, allow that age in place, allow, you know, currently the population in town, there is no one moving in, you know, within a certain demographic, because they can't afford it and they would like to. They had an accessory dwelling unit where they could either rent it or have a parent, you know, instead of paying for daycare, you know, you have your parent live there, and so that, I'm gonna say that was like most of the
Right.
input. from
But the
plan.
two families is really about increasing density near town centers in a way that preserves neighborhood character, right? That was the fundamental driver behind trying
Which an
to
accessory
make
dwelling
two families
unit would do
possible,
as well.
Right,
but in a more limited way within that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I think the the talk was about increasing density, but, you know, needing to go back one more step from that. Well, why do we want to increase density? And I think it was to preserve space so that things weren't developed outside of town.
Exactly.
And then also to hopefully, in theory, reduce cars, reduce things like that, so that, you know, that has a twofold effect. So we kept focusing, I think, on increasing density. But really what we're trying to do is preserve that space. I mean, you could also do the converse to preserve space. Like you could do more restrictions, right? If you don't want things being built up outside of town. But I think that's already done.
Yeah, those
Right.
it's already pretty restrictive, the
Right.
huge lot sizes. But the thing is that it's,
And the other one's
to
affordability.
encourage the in-town stuff, that's why we had this kind of idea of associate this with Residence C or half mile
Right.
from village centers. As opposed to accessory dwellings, which is the age in place, which could be any resident of town.
Right.
I don't understand how increasing density closer to town decreases density on the outer skirts of town. Like, doesn't it just simply
Well,
increase density?
it
in town?
increases density in town, but hopefully, so we don't have to do things that would allow greater density elsewhere, sprawl.
Can you be more specific? Like,
Well,
understand?
so
Could
there've
they,
been,
would
Would
they
you not
divide
grant
their
us
property, you know,
a
like,
PBR, like
Yeah. Well, it was in the context in part about wanting to increase multi-units
dwellings.
in areas that were not that were outside.
Exactly.
residency.
So, historically, we've had, for example, PRDs. And they could be anywhere in town, and they're creating multifamily housing, and they're outside of village centers, and so therefore, creating more sprawl.
But are you going to change the PRD regulations so that
So we
those are
talked about
represented?
so the first two things are accessory dwelling and two family, but then we also have two PRDs, and the two PRDs are the sort of village PRD, higher density PRD, and the other one would be the
outside?
country PRD, if you will, and that one was going to be the natural resource protection zoning model, which is, yes, you try to preserve open space.
So are we changing the PRD regulations at the same time we're trying to get this passed?
The goal, there were,
Hope.
yeah,
Sorry,
there
I'm
were,
sorry.
there
That's
were
right, we don't catch you up.
dreams, let's say, not even just hopes, just dreams of there are these, accessory dwellings, the two family, then the two PRDs, and then there was the throw depot, which looks like it's not going to be this year. So those four things.
Yeah.
I think they go together. Like if you're
Right. The idea is it's a minestrone soup
Right.
that tastes great when you have all the flavors.
why if you're going to increase density in one part of town, it's like if you're not decreasing density in another part of town, you're just increasing density. Period.
Yeah.
Well, but the other thing that we heard about from the person who was talking about, I don't remember if she was talking about affordable housing or what, was that just because you are making more units doesn't mean you're going to have a higher population necessarily. It means you might have more diverse population. So you might have a single person moving in, or you have two people moving in, not necessarily a family moving in.
Right. Versus it's a classic suburban family
Right.
model for.
Well, I
It's
think
already pretty tiny.
I think she has. I think she has data about that. That's what I thought, and that's what I wanted to hear when we get to the point where we need to, have more, talk about this. Is can it be demonstrated that we aren't just increasing the population, which has all those other effects? But the other thing is that I feel like is missing from the conversation. So that was the plan, right? So there's this multi-pronged approach, and so that's good thinking, and it takes a while to kind of get through all that. We were just kind of doing it linearly right now.
Yes.
The other thing is, I still don't think that we're trying to address affordable housing by saying, well, if they're smaller houses by nature, they're going to be less expensive, but it doesn't mean they're going to be affordable. And I don't know if there's anything else, and we don't have to do it this year because I feel like we have a good plan for this year. But I think it's important to say, in the next 5 years, as we're changing zoning, we're working on this to do these things. This is how we're addressing affordable housing.
Well, at this past year's town meeting, of course, there was a lot of work on getting a funding model
Right.
to fund affordable housing initiatives. So I think that, at least, again, as I articulated in the Concord Journal article, the goal of this is that sort of the so-called missing middle, the folks that it doesn't make sense to subsidize that
That wouldn't
housing.
qualify.
You just want to create units that are inherently more affordable because they're smaller, or, you know, it's more
Right.
convenient to make them, kind of thing. So that's accessory dwellings, the two-family,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So as, what I've learned in my time as a town planner, when the board talks about an initiative where the longer you talk about it, the more variations and, you know, questions and, things that, you know, need to be looked at or addressed, or where then the conversation you had on the accessory dwelling unit part, that was fairly straightforward,
Yeah.
fairly simple. And now you've gotten to a topic where it has all of these different little, you know, webs that go out, and just kind of, you know, once you start down a path, it gets tangled a little bit. I think back to what Burton said, I think there is a place for two families in, you know, the residency zone district. And as I think through how a bylaw would work, you know, this first time around, having it be, you know, you can have by special permit a two-family if it meets all of the dimensional requirements, and, you know, the 6 special permit findings are made, and if somebody, you know, wants to try it, then you do, you know, the butters get notified, and if it comes out and it's, you know, this, you know, 2 little garrisons that get stuck together, and, you know, then you know, that is an impact on the neighborhood character. And so while it's not the simplest thing, it's kind of being able to test the waters on and figuring out where, you know, does by right fit and how does it fit. So it's kind of, I think when you try to, you know, start solving something, more questions come up every time you try to solve it. Then you kind of have to take a step back and figure out, you know, why isn't it not working?
I'm just trying to see if there's any other things that we need to have a quick discussion about on this. It sounded like we did not, for two families, we weren't going to stipulate that there be a unit that was owner occupied. I think at that point, it's no longer really a true two-family. Though Merrimack does require that. Oh, and then the other concern I think that I heard raised that I think is a very good concern is about parking. And the irony is that, like, the regulations that are on the books from other Massachusetts towns are to ensure that there is enough parking, as opposed to that it doesn't become a parking lot. So that's another interesting point in garages too. You know, that in Concord, how do you avoid ending up with the 4-car garage attached to your two-family? Again, the floor area ratio should help.
With an accessory dwelling on the garage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did try to cover that. You can't have both.
Okay.
Two-family and an accessory. Your accessory dwelling on each of your two families.
No, but to Kate's point, I mean, then what you get is somebody who builds, you know, let's take the typical 10,000 square foot lot, you get somebody that builds a 3,600 square foot two-family, and then the rest of each side of the side yard setbacks is pavement.
Yes.
No garage, but it's pavement for
However many cars.
for, yeah, however many parking spaces they have. So, you know, and that in it itself kind of goes against some of the other, you know, items expressed in the long-range plan.
Well, this gets back to our residential stormwater bylaw, which could put in the parameters that would prevent such things, right?
Sure.
But I didn't know if anybody had any ideas here, because it
So
just
if
is,
you're only talking resident C, I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking within walking distance to the train
Right.
station, so, it's, you can say, and as far as the dimensional requirements, allow them to go down to, only, one parking space per each dwelling.
yeah, I think that's too strict.
Then I think developers are
Would
going
never,
to
would never do it.
have an issue with that.
So you can say, then you can say a maximum of 4 parking spaces.
Yeah. And then, I think the garages, again, could help be taken care of by themselves with the floor area ratio.
So the FAR covers garages?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
I wonder, this is just for the character of it again. Like for me, 2-family is always.
always have a certain amount of pavement. Yeah.
No, also like, it's just the symmetry. It's just.
Yeah.
So if we can say something like one of the houses need to be the main, almost like a dominant house, and so I can one of them larger in terms of footprint, or I don't know if we can go in that kind of.
I think it depends on where it is though.
Yeah, because
Some
like
of them
in,
are
I
those
mean,
mirrors,
Well, this
right?
was,
But that's
in
that's
your
why it goes back
3A,
to the
it's kinda-
accessory dwelling.
Yeah.
That's why I'm seeing it more as almost like a spectrum between the.
I mean, if you're gonna do that, do think it has to be special permit, where it actually gets reviewed and you get to comment on that.
Oh, here we go, and then 4A, like Duxbury has this requirements.
Yeah, there's,
I mean, when I think of like concerns about the character of the neighborhood, I'm not sure, I mean, you could be concerned that there'd be a 2-family that's really ugly, but I have the same concern for a single family that's really
Right.
ugly.
yes, that's the thing. I don't see that, 2 families don't necessarily have market cornered on ugliness.
Right. No, it's not just that, but also maybe this helps with the parking issue. I mean, one of them could be a smaller studio type unit, and maybe. It
Oh, well, and
doesn't
it
need a
could be,
footprint.
by the way. I don't think there's anything here limiting that.
like the giant.
And yet, I think symmetrical sort of duplex structures, that's a traditional pattern of
Right.
2-family and that we have examples of in town, and I don't see any problem with that.
But then you will have 4-car garages, basically. That's the problem.
Well,
I believe.
the other thing is we could limit garages, but I think that again, the floor area ratio is going to prevent
Right.
you're on a residence C lot. You put a 4-car garage. You're not going to have much floor area ratio left for your main structure. You know,
Maybe.
if you're on residence A, you could do that, but not in residence C normally. Most residence C. So I did have a real concern with number 13, just at the end of my thing. I think a lot of our planned residential development bylaw is based upon the carrot of, compared to a subdivision plan, you're gonna, as a developer, get more yield out of your lot with the PRD. And that gives us the opportunity to get this other pattern of development, which I think we very much prefer over a traditional subdivision. But if, by right, you
Well,
could.
but you're only talking resident C.
Yes, there aren't many lots available
Yeah, I mean,
for
is there,
PRD.
I can think of one. Is there any more?
Well, there are a few, I think, beyond Damon Mill on the right.
I mean, I can ask
But
Jill, I mean, she.
it's probably a low risk, but I just wanted to note that, if suddenly, instead of proposing, 18 single families, you're
Yeah.
proposing 36 2-families, and as a developer, you could just go in with a subdivision plan and just put them in.
But if we're in residence C, 10,000 square foot lots, you're talking about, 10, 20. Realistically, you're talking about at least a 30,000 square foot lot
To do that, yeah.
to do that. Well, because under subdivision,
And there-
subdivision rules and regs, you
Yeah.
have limitations on how long, but how short a cul-de-sac can be.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, it'd be very simple to on the GIS, say,
To see if
here's-
there is even any.
You know,
left.
here's,
Yeah.
here's the Resident C lots, they're, 15,000 square feet and, up to 30, and if there's any that are over 30.
Well, and then it's also the case that we were thinking of tweaking the in-town PRD anyway. So,
Would-
yeah, that could perhaps counteract this, because we were talking about in-town PRDs could have more density. So that makes the attractiveness of the PRD potentially higher as well. Anyway, I just wanted to at least note that because it just, we talk about unintended consequences and it's good to think about
Absolutely.
the possible ramifications.
What would you like me to do for you next?
Well, do you think it's worth drawing up a similar thing to what Elizabeth did on
Yeah, for
accessory dwellings?
accessory
I mean,
dwelling,
I
yeah.
don't think it was
Answer them.
that muddled the conversation. It just went in a little less disciplined fashion.
Well, but you have, if you look at your, on this key questions, 1, 2.
I don't know if we answered them.
Have you answered any
Right.
of them?
We've discussed both sides of it.
Yeah. So I think we had a discussion on the by right, and I think we had opinions that went around a couple times on this.
And then came
And I
back
think
to
that
special permit.
Elizabeth talked about by right up into a threshold, 3,600 square feet as an example, and then special permit above that on a conforming lot. So is
No,
that
I heard you say at the end
and
that
then
maybe special
just
permit is
going
the way
all
to
the
go on
back
everything,
to
right?
Special permit
To
if,
Burton's
for
point,
anything?
to ease into it.
to ease into it as far as the whole
Okay.
neighborhood character
There's
side
Burton's
of
original
things.
point, then I think it changes.
All right, well then that makes the 1 through 3, that simplifies 1 through 3 to just one thing. Okay? And then design requirements are embedded in the special permit process.
Some.
I mean, I don't think that we're going to be, no, more than just dimension, the neighborhood character type of
Yeah, so
criterion.
there's the 6 findings.
So I think that would be covered in a Concord sort of way.
Yeah, well, impact on natural environment, that's where you could get if somebody had, here's the house and we're gonna pave the whole,
Yeah.
rest of the lot.
Yeah, and then we talked about dimensional requirements, and we talked about the possibility of a bonus, but maybe easing into that. We talked about, minimum gross floor area for each unit. I mean, we could probably just inherit the 350 square feet for the accessory.
And would the minimum square footage be so that people aren't building tiny homes, or what's the requirement on a minimum?
I have no idea how that got in there. I can ask Marcia.
Why would we want a
Do we
minimum?
care?
I'm not sure why we would put a minimum.
I literally cannot answer that. I don't know why there is a minimum.
An efficiency apartment. I mean, effectively.
I'll ask Marcia.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
with what,
Maybe there's even a state criteria.
I mean, with everything being sold for square footage, I
Yeah.
just feel like everything is maxed out, so I
Uh-huh.
don't know why we.
We didn't discuss this. Must the 2 units be in a single structure? And most of the cases I saw, they did need to be. Otherwise,
Otherwise, you have to get your lot divided, not a subdivision, but like a.
It would just be a condo.
it'd be a condo. But
Oh,
but I think that
I
if
see.
you have a separate building that is there, I just feel like that feels more like an accessory dwelling, or at least you don't really want another full-size separate structure built, or do you?
But so
On the
that's the
same lot.
question, if
I don't
it's
think
two
we do.
identical, that's
What?
why I was saying maybe one of them is
yeah.
a.
But if it's
Could you
more-
They're
still
both
meet the
dense
setbacks?
development, you know?
so again, the setbacks would still apply. So, again, our residents see there's not gonna be a lot of space to do this
Yeah.
anyway, but, I just thought, okay, making them part of either a attached or semi-detached structure would be good, and then if you're an independent structure, then it's an accessory dwelling, and it just falls under the accessory dwelling bylaw. It has to be owner occupied for the main structure, all that stuff.
But why is that? I mean, that doesn't.
Well, so that you don't, I don't know, so you don't end up with effectively
2 units. next to each
unit that looks like doubling down on the lots. Yeah, it would look like you had a super non-conforming lot, because
Well, I mean, if you built 2 houses, I'm thinking about
one behind the
Some
other.
examples of houses that are effectively 2 units now that were originally a house and a carriage house, or a house
Yeah.
and a barn, and that fits pretty well with the
Sure
Concord
does.
character.
Yeah.
You know, there's that great example on Main Street across from, right? I'm trying to remember. Over in West Concord, across from the 1880s, or the
Well,
Jerome.
so those are slightly different,
are those called?
because those are, when, in that case, you're probably looking at two, structures that were built prior to 1929, and the town had, when the town adopted zoning. So that's where, currently under the bylaw, somebody can, for those structures, you can get a special permit, to create, additional dwelling units.
Yeah.
So it's not an accessory dwelling, it's an actual
Yeah.
additional dwelling
Well,
unit.
I wasn't speaking to how it's allowed or not allowed under the bylaw today. I'm talking just about its form. When in considering whether we want to do, say, it needs to be in a single building or not. You know, I don't quite have the same aversion to you. You know, I think you could have this perfect Palladian building with 2 doors, and you know there's lots of connected ones on Commonwealth Ave that are.
Yeah.
But I could also see that form giving some more creativity to a developer who wanted to have something that looked like a barn and something that looked like a small house. With the concern that I've heard expressed about dimensional setbacks from the lot line.
Right.
You don't want somebody to be able to treat it as a accessory structure that's right on the lot line with the, what is
Right.
it now, 28-foot roof or whatever. What did we make it? 24 foot.
Yeah. So I guess then we won't necessarily
Yeah.
require that
I mean, if you can somehow get
You-
2 buildings in
and still be within the
lot
setbacks
lines,
and
with your floor area ratio, you could end up with something really interesting.
I want to think about that for a while, but
Okay.
that's fine. But I'm curious about your number 9, which is distinction between 2-family and a duplex and a townhouse, because that's related to that discussion. And
it all comes down to definitions.
okay, or is there a standard definition for?
There's nothing different between a 2-family and a duplex.
Okay, duplex implies 2,
2.
and then townhouse.
Well, duplex implies one structure though. So this is where we're getting
Okay.
back to.
Well, so does a 2-family.
Well, that's what we were just talking
No,
about.
what we were talking about is can you hit.
Well, that's not 2-family, that's 2 dwelling units on a lot.
That's
Okay.
that's
So there we
A
go.
2-family by definition implies
to be
a
attached.
single structure.
Okay, so there we go.
A duplex is a single structure.
Okay,
So
so
we
if
could
not,
not-
then it's going to be an accessory dwelling unit.
Well.
If it's a separate
It would
structure.
be an additional dwelling unit.
So
Which
then do
not
we
allowed.
allow additional dwelling units? Yeah.
Currently only by special
Right,
permit.
right, but
And if the
would we
structures
under
were built
the-
Before 1929.
Would we under this?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
that's the question.
So it sounds like the board is intrigued by the possibility that we could,
I don't think
but
we should.
not
I'm not.
sure.
Not me.
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
not
okay,
intrigued
you're
in a
not-
good way.
Okay.
I don't think we should do separate
All right.
Okay, but that helps. So if we're saying right now, if we're saying 2-family, we mean it's attached, and
Yeah.
and one structure. And if we wanted to do something else, that is something different than this 2-family bylaw. Like if we
Right,
wanted
you could
2
do
structures.
accessory dwelling unit.
No, she's saying additional.
It's
If it was
No,
above
but
a
you could
certain
also
size.
treat the thing as an accessory dwelling, not do
If
the
it were- if it
two-family.
were
You could just have
small.
your single family with the accessory dwelling
Right.
in residence C.
correct, but the owner would have to live in one of the
Yes.
units. and
Okay.
you
All
couldn't
that.
condo it.
All that,
Okay.
So
yeah,
that's why they're different.
yes.
And then a townhouse. Is a townhouse have to be attached?
A townhouse, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, I think a townhouse is
Sort of a vertical.
Multi-floor.
is a type of vertical element of a house.
There are no townhouses. I don't think we have townhouses.
I don't think we really have any townhouses in Concord.
We don't?
Concord Green has about 8 or 10 of them.
Oh, thank you.
They're, a lot of it's condos, but they're
Stacked up?
townhouses that face right on Main Street, that have the garage underneath and the door.
Yeah, I don't think the townhouse model is one that we're really trying to build more of.
I
Okay,
think a townhouse is an architectural term on
Yeah.
how the unit gets stacked above itself.
Right. Some of the bylaws that I reviewed did refer to them,
okay.
but maybe as just a two-family type. Yeah. So, so I think that clarifies it on two families. And then I thought that on the garages and parking, we didn't really come to a conclusion.
What if we had something that said you must have this much percentage of the site as
Pervious surface.
right? Can you do that? So that
Sure,
'Cause
sure
isn't-
you can, but. Yeah,
I mean, the
then
question
you're
is-
getting into so then you're really getting into those
Stormwater.
what ifs on this and what ifs on that. So I think if you're just gonna rely on the special permit process, you have impacts on natural environment.
So we can just say, hey, there's just too much pavement here. Yeah.
But I would want to make sure that's somehow written into the criteria so they don't show up
This
here
is
and
your
then.
conversation towards the end of July that you have to have with the Board of Appeals. Because currently,
They're the
special
enforcing arm.
permits are through the Board of Appeals.
I mean, I could see something like this Medway requirement, but flipped a little bit. It's saying it's gotta have at least 2 parking spaces, right? Sufficient to allow 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit. I could see it being something like, a maximum of 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit, and not dictating whether one's in a garage or one's, parking.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to, depending on the length of your driveway, it's hard to decide where the
Right.
parking is, So,
Well, so I think about, where my mom grew up in Wisconsin. There's a lot of, the houses, and they're only, they're only like 5 feet from the sidewalk before you get to the porch. And then it was a single little driveway, and that had the grass strip down the middle, and a 1-car garage in the back. Everybody had 2 cars, and if somebody had to get up and move a car,
yeah.
I mean, it's only in, a matter of convenience where driveways had to get, became wider and wider, so, nobody had to go out and move a car.
Yeah, see, I think your Somerville example, it's where minimum lot size, 5,000 square feet. I mean, so there just isn't any lot left when you put a building on it, And so, of course, everything's pavement. But I don't think Concord, you have that many lots that are that small. I mean, if they are, they're non-conforming and,
I mean, somebody's gonna build the absolute minimum, and it'll
Yeah.
be the ugly, symmetrical, flipped reverse plan with the parking right out front, and a garage
Will they,
left on
though?
either side.
Yeah, see,
will they? Because in Concord,
I
they
know,
go
I
sell
mean-
it to somebody. I mean, someone's got to buy it.
I mean, they're
I
selling
mean,
anything.
consider the current model that our zoning encourages the most, which is the single family large
Yes.
house. And think of some of the examples of that.
Yeah.
The absolute cheapest minimum possible with 3 shrubs planted out front. I think
is
it's,
it, do you want to open it up to public comment?
I
Because,
think that with 11 we're pretty much done. I mean, this is that last topic, so I think that again
Might
back
have
to
some other
Elizabeth
ideas.
before we open it up to public comment. I think we just now went through those questions and did come up with.
Some answers. So how about if I'll take what I've heard.
Yes,
And
and you
I'll
could
put it
even
into,
document the ambiguities.
Key questions with PB answers. and then just put the questions that still kind of need a little bit more.
Okay. And so, yes,
We might need to come back to this after we talk about
This
PRDs in town.
oh,
You know,
we
like,
will
in
come
other
back.
words, right,
Don't
in other
worry.
words, you don't have to finalize
This
it.
is the first
Right.
brainstorming discussion.
Right.
We've had
So
one
we don't have
in
to
each of
feel
the
like
things. We're
it's
gonna
all
now.
about
Yes, we're gonna do the PRDs
Oh, yeah.
is next,
Oh,
as
we're
the
trying to do
next
all four of
brainstorming
those
discussion.
things.
Not tonight. Not
So
tonight.
that's what I'm saying, like it's linear.
Thanks, for some reason I thought you said you were doing it in the next year.
There's a
next
different
cycle.
one.
No, that was the Thoreau Depot transit-oriented development, which it sounds like we still don't have MAPC coming back. So it's like, well,
So four-
there's
four
nothing to,
bylaws is what we're trying to do.
okay. So now I guess it is time to open it up for public comment. So I'd entertain questions from the public. Yes,
Hi.
Identify
Sue
yourself.
Bowden, 19 Sunnyside Lane. I have a bunch of questions and comments, although I don't think I actually want answers to any of these questions. I just want to bring them up. First of all, I'd like to encourage you to continue with both the accessory dwelling unit change for the whole town and the two-family or two-unit change for just the center of town. I think it's very valuable to pursue both of these paths and hopefully succeed with both of them in the town. Ms. Hughes noted that this has been a very messy discussion about the family, but I think that's okay because as she also noticed, you're starting early this year, so there's time for it. I see houses going up around town that are single family and max out everything. They max out the floor area, the size, the ugliness, the amount of pavement, the number of cars, the everything. And I personally would much rather have go up next door to me a giant ugly two-family house than an equally giant, equally ugly one-family house. Because at least then we would have some more affordability and diversity around the town. I have always admired around town all of the existing two-family houses I've seen with their symmetrical building. I do note that since they predate zoning, they also predate car culture. And
Right.
so that is the most difficult point. And I really wish we could see some maximum pavement, but I'd also like to see it for one-family houses. And I could see it might not be possible to cover under this. It might be better to cover under stormwater, even though that would leave the town open to some unfortunately fully paved lots, or nearly fully paved, which we have seen with some single-family houses. I'm thinking of one. You didn't discuss what to do about the possibility of shared utilities. You brought it up briefly under sewage. First of all, under connecting to the sewer system, it's not clear to me whether this can be handled for particularly accessory dwellings as a way to sneak by sewage limits. I actually don't know how it works. If you have a permanent house and you then expand your number of bedrooms with an accessory dwelling, if you are already on the sewer system, are you allowed by right to increase your use of the sewer system with more bedrooms? Or do you have to apply for that? Because if you got it automatically through the accessory dwelling, maybe it would be a way to increase the size of your house without having to ask for an increase. And that all depends on what the law is, which again, I don't know. I was also thinking, if someone is building a new two-family house, it would be much, and if they went with geothermal, you wouldn't want to put in, for example, 2 geothermal systems. You might want to have shared laundry facilities or other shared utilities, and I think that the town should be encouraging that just because it's more efficient in terms of resources and carbon footprint. Let's see. I think it would probably be too difficult to fold into this year's bylaw, but if there was an affordability bonus for putting in a two-family, or if it was an opportunity for the town to maybe buy down one of the units into affordability, that would actually address Ms. McEnany's comment about density, because any affordable unit in the center of town decreases the likelihood of getting a 40B, which frankly would go in on the edge of town. And I realize it's just a little bit of time, but again, every little bit helps. And finally, I'd like to encourage you to go with the two-family by right, because I think that if they're bigger house, bigger profit, and if it's harder to put in a big two-family, then you're just gonna go for rather than a smaller two-family, you're gonna go for the bigger one-family. But I was thinking that the additional dwelling unit would be a place to go for special permit. If you wanna put in a single structure or semi-attached, that's two-family, that would be by right, I'm suggesting. But if you actually wanted to physically build two detached buildings, as Mr. Flint suggested, exists pre-zoning on some properties, then you would need a special permit, because that seems like it would really affect the character of the neighborhood more by have an extra house, an extra building. Finally, now you didn't seem too slavishly interested in following. In fact, you seemed slavishly interested in not following, which I applaud, the examples from other towns.
Yes.
Some of them mentioned stairways required to be indoors. That wasn't well defined. If they mean you can't have steps up to a separate entrance, if they meant that you couldn't have a separate porch for the second unit, these sorts of things are just wacky. So I'm glad to see you're not too interested in following this. And thank you for listening, and thank you for working on this. I think it's great.
Okay. Any other comments from the public?
Good job. Keep going. I think it's very complicated, and I'm so glad that you're attacking this issue.
And for the record, you are.
I'm Susan Bates, and I'm your select board liaison.
There you go. Thanks.
I do have one question. What about, would anyone be allowed to put a tiny house on their, as an accessory dwelling on their property?
It would have to be 350 square feet.
Oh, maybe that.
So that's one of the questions I'll find out, where did 350 square feet come from?
Well, but that's for accessory dwelling, right? But I think we were talking about single family.
Or, yeah, two-family.
Two family, thank you, yeah, okay.
But then if two-family has to be attached,
Right, right. Then
then
you have
the
to-
tiny, it would be a tiny addition.
Yeah,
You're out on wheels and movable.
Okay, any other comments from the public? All right, well, thanks for bearing through what was a somewhat chaotic brainstorming discussion on two families. So, now, well, the signatory pages, I think we can handle at the end, right? Elizabeth? We can just,
All it is a vote.
oh,
so we voted.
we voted on who was who, right?
No, this is, every year, you
Yeah.
are required to vote to authorize the chair, the clerk, the town planner, and the DPL director to sign on behalf of the board.
I think that's highly controversial.
And then, by law, you're required to fill out, each of you is required to sign, and one of these goes to the land court, one goes to the registry of deeds.
Okay. Well, I would like someone who is not the chair, the vice chair, or the clerk to propose to do such a thing, such as a conflict of interest.
No,
Do I just get to vote, just has to be done?
Oh,
it's just authorizing,
yeah, to authorize the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk be able to sign on behalf of the
And-
board,
the DPL and director and the town planner
Okay.
to sign on behalf of
for the board.
Okay, I
Do
did
you-
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any second on that?
Second.
Any discussion? Any votes for it? All in favor? Okay. All opposed? Nope. All right.
I will be sending these around, and only Matt, Kristen, and Burton will need to sign this twice. So just
Okay.
make sure you sign each page. There's 2 spots for you to sign.
Okay. Okay, and then we're up to minutes. Reviewing minutes of May 21st and June 11th.
Yeah, I don't think
Here, I
Nancy
might have one.
finished the May 21st.
Okay,
You do
so the
have-
June 11th
Oh,
minutes that
no.
are in front of us.
No, you have both. May 21st was emailed to you in your packet,
Oh, that's fine.
and June 11th is on the table.
I have to admit, I did not get an opportunity to review this. Okay, what did you think?
I had no comments.
On either set?
On the ones you sent around this afternoon, or that were sent around this afternoon.
Okay.
Was
What
there
about
two
the ones
sets?
that were included in your original packet from Friday?
I don't have any comments on that either.
And I can always put both of these on the next agenda. If that's preferable. I have one yes.
I would be willing to defer to next meeting, but
Okay, that's fine.
I do my pen first
if
time.
others just, I mean, I don't want my lack of preparedness to.
No, that's
It's
fine.
more your thoroughness, not your lack.
Yes. So I'll just defer it to the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to take a look. Okay. So then that takes us to committee liaison reports. I wondered if others had any things that they'd like to report back from liaisons? Yes.
I would like to report that there is an upcoming HATS meeting on Thursday, which I plan to attend.
Okay. Anybody else been going to any other meetings?
I missed the public hearing that the CPC had, but that was just the kickoff educational thing for this year's funding requests. In years past, it's been very low attended. I don't know how it was this year.
Okay. I attended the chair's breakfast. I already mentioned one thing from that, but wanted to mention that there's a long-range capital planning and facilities committee being formed. There's, because of the upcoming big capital projects that are anticipated, that town meeting's likely to be the last week of April next year. So that's a little different timing than we've had recently. Also, the Board of Health has issued a preliminary approval for the septic system for a 3-lot proposed subdivision on Barnes Hill Road, which in theory should be coming our way sometime soon.
Does that explain all those strange back and forth approval not required? Or am I thinking of?
On Barnes Hill Road?
Yeah.
No, I don't think
What's
so.
what's being built on there right now? A subdivision or a PRD? There's like private road with 3 or so houses, or maybe they're already done.
On Barnes Hill Road.
Barnes Hill Road.
There's some houses that have been built up there recently on the hill. This is down,
Those were subdivisions.
That was okay. Just
This lot is adjacent to Macomb Pond.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. But I think there will be a lot of public interest in that subdivision plan.
That'll be the first subdivision that I get to hear about because all the other ones have been PRDs.
They're a lot of fun. Then,
This one won't disappoint.
then I think another topic that we need to discuss that came out of that was we've been invited to the select board meeting of July 15th to talk about our housing choice initiative and to get the select board's perspective. And I was beginning to wonder, when is our next meeting?
I think I was just
2
looking.
weeks.
July
July
9th.
9th?
July 9th. Well, that's probably okay. I was concerned that if we didn't have another meeting before the next select board meeting, that we might not be coherent in our discussion with them. But I think that armed with, our feedback on accessory dwellings tonight, by then we will have had a second round of refinement on the 2-family, and we would have had a first discussion of the PRD.
That's on the July 15th.
Well, this is on our July 9th meeting. We
But
would
you've
have
been
had
invited to the
15th.
select boards, yeah.
Right, and so I was just making sure that we had at least among ourselves discussed each of the the different
So you think on the
elements of the housing choice plan before we
next
set.
time will be PRD?
Next time, I think we should try to go after PRD.
Is there anything else on the agenda?
Oh, there'll be things on the agenda. No, I mean, and, you know, we'll try to be quick, but yeah.
Well,
I think we should keep marching,
Mhm.
you know?
I think so too.
So, because the other alternative would be to put off the select board a little bit until we're, you know, we've got a little bit more. So actually, Susan, you've been watching and listening. Do you have an opinion about whether the July would be good? Do we want to go early, or do we want to wait until we've got stuff more baked?
Well, I like what I heard tonight, you know, the recap of the accessory dwelling and then the discussion about two-family, and maybe, I don't know, maybe bump it out another 2 weeks to the end of July.
Okay, so that's,
Just so you feel comfortable, because if you have to finish up two-family and do 2 PRDs in one meeting,
Yeah.
that might be a little dense, a lot to cover, and then kind of
be able to put a bow
pull
around it.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what I may do, is go back to Mike and ask for a little bit more time. The other question is whether we want to take a posse down there or just send a representative, an ambassador.
Can't be there on the 15th, so.
Okay, well,
We're
that,
gonna-
I
we're
don't
gonna
think
move
that,
it, though.
we're gonna try to move it out.
Oh.
So let's just assume it's 2 weeks later, that'd be the 29th, let's say.
One thing is, I'm not gonna be here on July 23rd. So I don't know if anybody else is not gonna be here, but I know we.
Oh, for our next two.
Oh, I'm not here also.
It looks like that's when there's something listed on the for Barnes Hill subdivision on the 23rd. I don't know if that's the project.
Yeah,
I was
well,
referring to.
we're having trouble
With the
keeping
quorum.
quorums because
Right.
we're down a person. By the way, we need another person on the planning board, so anybody, please.
You should.
I should, I'll get somebody.
Yeah, because with 2 people not here for
Then
sure, then
automatically
we're already
Well,
under
they-
quorum unless we get somebody, and getting someone sworn in by the 23rd is gonna be like, we gotta get going. Yeah,
Okay.
So-
I'll let the.
I mean, it's always a
Let the
risk in
applicant know you
late
may
July,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but yes.
The issue with that preliminary subdivision plan
You
is
have a
under state
clock.
law, you have a certain time frame.
Yeah.
The applicant has granted an extension. And I think what that extension allowed for the meeting on July 23rd, and then an additional meeting the next 2 weeks later in August
Mhm.
to review a decision, and then.
And this is a
I can't remember.
preliminary subdivision plan? Yeah.
So, if there is not a quorum for the 23rd, you can, I believe the time extension that was granted would allow you to push the meeting to your meeting in August, but it would be one meeting and you would have to, review the preliminary, plan and issue your decision.
But why aren't we seeing it next time? Why was there an extension? I mean, why aren't we seeing it July 9th?
There wasn't enough time to distribute the preliminary plan, get staff comments, do the legal notice.
But is that their issue or our issue?
No, that's my issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's gonna be a challenge, I think.
So it may require finding an additional meeting date,
Right,
just for that.
Yeah.
For that application.
okay.
You know, unless there's, you know, a green card got submitted and somebody can get, you know, nominated and appointed and sworn in by June 23rd.
Yeah,
By June 23rd?
right.
Yeah, so somebody would have to be.
So they gotta
that
have
was
2
July-
select board
July
meetings?
23rd.
Yeah,
July 23rd,
Yes.
Yeah.
So we basically, they have to be, you know, nominated, recommended by us in time for there to
No.
then be 2.
Nope. Nope, it's
Oh, they can just go straight to the select board,
Yep.
right? So, good. Well, they just need to go through 2 select board meetings.
Two
One,
select board
yeah.
meetings.
July 1st is our next one, and then July 15th.
So somebody would
So
have
July
to submit a green card.
Before July 1st. Okay. Nothing like a little pressure.
Or as I said, if you don't have a quorum, then we would just have to find an additional.
We've got a
date.
week to track somebody down. Not even a week.
Put a little,
I'll do it. I'll do it.
put a little
48 hours.
thing in the newspaper, like a little opinion.
No,
thing.
so, I mean, I believe the time extension does get you to your meeting in August. So it would just be, you'd have your meeting in August and.
Yeah, but we'd be
you would have to-
rendering.
You would have to you would have to render your decision
Yeah.
that night, so.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, it is only a preliminary plan, it doesn't grant them any rights.
Yeah, but just thinking back to past subdivision plans that we've had, doing that in one night, I just it seems unlikely.
Well, I believe the material is posted
Okay.
on the planning board's webpage,
Yeah.
so, you might wanna take a look at the.
Take a look. Okay, I will take a look. All right. I think that's everything that I had for liaison. So I think we're ready for just general public comment at this point. Any staff updates? I mean, tomorrow we have this workshop, but
Yep, so tomorrow, is the workshop. So hopefully we get a good turnout for that. Also, today, working with our Transportation Management Association, Crosstown Connect, we filed a grant application for a community transit grant to implement a shuttle from the 2 commuter rail stations to some of the larger employment, places of employment. I was able to get letters of support from the Guild for Human Services, on Virginia Road. Our regional planning agency, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Novaya, who owns 300 Baker Ave. And surprisingly, the superintendent for MCI Concord. MCI Concord employs over 320 people, and this is just the prison, not the farm, and receives over 10,000 visitors a year.
right.
Approximately, almost 800 visitors a month.
This is a big thing to be able to get a connection from. Yeah.
The visitor population to the prison is generally considered an underserved population that relies heavily on public transportation. So the superintendent was very supportive, even vetted it through legal, and has some parameters on where, the shuttle can drop people off in the Commonwealth parking lot area, but was in support of the project. So there is the grant proposal, there's a considerable match. It's a 50% match on the part of the community. It's estimated that the first year of operation, this would be to hire through our Transportation Management Association, the company they work with that runs the shuttle services in Acton, Littleton, Westford. It's through Transaction Associates. So you basically, you hire them and they provide the shuttle, the employees, the drivers, and they have a much larger pool to pull from. It would run from proposed to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's approximately $190,000. So while we don't have to have the funds in hand for our match to put in the grant, we will be scrambling. So looking to figure out how we provide our match, whether that's I'm not sure how how we're going to go about that, but there's other grant programs, but we're kind of pretty excited about the opportunity.
Okay.
I have a question. Did the hospital weigh in on it?
Oh yes, and I have a letter of support from Emerson Hospital.
Oh, good.
Forgot about that.
one shuttle, you think, is gonna,
No, it
Okay.
would, no,
okay.
yeah, no, it would more than likely be two.
Because even that's gonna be hard to make train times, but that's fantastic.
So, route would go from West Concord Commuter Rail Station up to the prison.
Okay.
From there, Route 2 to Baker Ave Extension.
Okay.
Come down Baker Ave Extension, hit 300, 310 Baker Ave, the Marriott. Come back out and go Baker Ave Extension to Emerson Specialty Care. From there, right adjacent is the Aeronautics School, which they have about 250 students.
Wow.
So
No,
would
we had
hit
an
that.
aeronautics school.
Come down and then make its way over to Emerson Hospital. From their main entrance is also the path that goes directly over to
Newburyport. Yeah.
New England Deaconess, which has about 275 employees. From there goes over to 747 Baker Ave and the Emerson's Breast Healthcare Center. And then back out, go across the street to Care One facility. And then from there, go out Main Street to the Concord Center train station. From there, Sudbury Road
But I mean,
to
that's,
Main Street. Given it'll be timing,
yeah,
whether there is a possibility of going up Kai's Road and stopping at the market.
see, I just,
And then
that's
from
great
there,
that you've looked at everything and you
Then,
can
you know,
time
or
it.
either stop in Concord Center directly, but then from there going out to Virginia Road, where the Guild is. There's also a very large law firm out there.
So you're saying one route, two shuttles along the same route, okay. Fantastic. Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah,
Thank
be
you.
great to see.
Yeah, well,
Especially for the visitors to the prison. I've seen them in all weather, you know,
Yeah.
it's really unfortunate what they have to go through. Yeah. Okay. Then I think general public comment, anything? All right, then I think we're ready to adjourn. Thanks.